Maya had been living on the streets of downtown Chicago for 3 months when the whispers started. At 17, she had learned to make herself invisible, sleeping in doorways and eating from dumpsters behind restaurants. Her long black hair was always tangled and her clothes were worn thin from washing in public restrooms. But what made people stare wasn't her appearance. It was what happened around her. Flowers seemed to bloom brighter where she walked. Stray cats followed her, their wounds mysteriously healing after she touched them. An old man's chronic cough disappeared after she sat next to him on a park bench for an hour. These small miracles should have brought her kindness, but instead, they brought fear. The trouble began when Mrs. Patterson, who owned the corner grocery store, saw Maya place her hands on a dying potted plant. Within minutes, the plant's brown leaves turned green again, and tiny buds appeared on its stems. Mrs. Patterson screamed and ran inside, calling Maya a witch and demanding she stay away from her store. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. People crossed the street when they saw her coming. Someone spray-painted witch on the wall where she usually slept. The local pastor gave sermons about evil walking among them, though he never mentioned Maya by name. Everyone knew who he meant. Maya tried to hide her gift, keeping her hands in her pockets and avoiding eye contact. She stopped touching the animals that approached her, even when she could see their pain. The loneliness was crushing. She had always been different, even before becoming homeless. Her grandmother, who raised her until she died last year, had the same gift. She called it the blessing of healing hands, but to everyone else it looked like witchcraft. The city became hostile. Store owners refused to serve her. Other homeless people avoided her, afraid of being associated with someone the neighborhood called cursed. Maya began to wonder if she really was evil, if maybe the gift that felt so natural to her was actually something dark and dangerous. She started traveling farther from the area where people knew her, venturing into the wealthy districts where nobody paid attention to another homeless teenager. The tall glass buildings and expensive cars felt like another world. She would sit in small parks between the skyscrapers, watching business people rush past in their suits, invisible to their busy lives. During these lonely days, Maya often remembered her grandmother's words. God gives gifts for a reason, child. Someday you'll understand why you have this blessing. But sitting alone on cold concrete, surrounded by a city that feared her, Maya struggled to see any blessing in her situation. The accusations of witchcraft followed her even to the wealthy district. Someone had posted her photo online with warnings about a dangerous witch girl roaming the city. Teenagers would point and laugh when they recognized her. Security guards watched her more closely. Maya felt like a hunted animal, constantly looking over her shoulder. One evening, as she searched through a dumpster behind an upscale restaurant, Maya found a newspaper with a headline that caught her attention. Billionaire's daughter battles mysterious illness. The article showed a photo of a pale young girl in a hospital bed, surrounded by the best doctors money could buy. They were baffled by her condition. Maya stared at the photo for a long time. The girl looked about her own age with the same dark circles under her eyes that Maya saw in her own reflection. But where Maya's came from, hunger and sleepless nights. On hard surfaces, this girl's came from something deeper, an illness that was slowly stealing her life away. For the first time in months, Maya felt something other than fear and loneliness. She felt a familiar warmth in her palms, the same sensation she got whenever her healing gift stirred to life. Looking at this dying girl, Maya knew with absolute certainty that she could help. The question was whether anyone would let her try, or if they would just see a dirty homeless girl accused of witchcraft. That night, Maya made a decision that would change everything. She carefully tore out the newspaper article and folded it into her pocket. Tomorrow, she would find a way to reach the billionaire's daughter, no matter what it took. Maybe this was why her grandmother's blessing had been passed down to her. Maybe this was her chance to prove that her gift came from love, not darkness. Richard Blackwood stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city sprawl below him like a living map of his empire. At 45, he controlled a technology company worth $12 billion, owned properties in 15 countries, and could buy anything money could purchase. But for the first time in his life, his wealth felt completely useless. His daughter Emma was dying, and no amount of money could save her. The doctors at Chicago General Hospital had been honest about Emma's condition from the beginning. They called it an autoimmune disorder, but that was just a fancy way of saying they had no idea what was wrong. Emma's body was attacking itself, destroying healthy tissue and organs without any clear cause. Her immune system had gone completely haywire 6 months ago, right after her 16th birthday. Richard had flown in specialists from around the world. The best immunologists from Switzerland examined her blood samples. Doctors from Japan tried experimental treatments. A team from Germany brought machines that cost more than most people's houses. Nothing worked. Emma continued to get weaker, her vibrant personality fading along with her physical strength. The worst part was watching his daughter's spirit break. Emma had always been full of life, the kind of teenager who organized charity fundraisers and dreamed of becoming a doctor herself. She wanted to help people, to make a difference in the world. Now she spent her days in a hospital bed, too weak to sit up for more than a few minutes at a time. Richard's wife Jennifer had left them 2 months ago. She claimed she couldn't watch Emma die, that the stress was too much for her to handle. She moved to their house in California and hired lawyers to handle the divorce papers. Richard barely noticed her absence. He was too focused on finding some miracle cure that didn't seem to exist. The latest test results lay spread across his mahogany desk. Emma's white blood cell count was dropping rapidly. Her liver and kidneys were showing signs of serious damage. Dr. Martinez, the head of her medical team, had suggested they start discussing end-of-life care and making Emma as comfortable as possible. Richard had thrown the doctor out of his office. Every morning, Richard sat by Emma's bedside before going to work. She would smile weakly and ask about his business meetings, pretending to be interested in quarterly reports and board decisions. They both knew she was trying to keep things normal, to give him something else to think about besides her condition. It broke his heart every single time. The hospital room was filled with flowers from well-wishers and expensive medical equipment that hummed and beeped constantly. Emma joked that she felt like she lived inside a spaceship, surrounded by machines that monitored every heartbeat and breath. The jokes were getting weaker, though, just like everything else about her. Richard had started researching alternative treatments online, despite knowing it was probably pointless. He looked into experimental drugs being tested in other countries. He investigated stem cell treatments and gene therapy. He even read about faith healers and spiritual ceremonies, though his rational business mind rejected such ideas immediately. Late at night, when Emma was sleeping and the hospital was quiet, Richard would walk the halls and think about all the ways he had failed as a father. He had given Emma everything money could buy: the best schools, designer clothes, expensive vacations, tutors and music lessons and writing instructors, but he had never learned how to just be present with her, how to have conversations that weren't interrupted by business calls. Now that he finally had time to focus completely on his daughter, she was slipping away from him. The irony was devastating. He would trade every dollar, every property, every business achievement for just one more year with Emma. He would give up everything to see her laugh again, to watch her argue with him about staying out too late or spending too much money on clothes. The nurses had started giving him gentle suggestions about support groups for parents of terminally ill children. Richard couldn't bring himself to attend. Sitting in a circle talking about feelings wouldn't bring Emma back to health. He needed action, solutions, results. That's how he had always solved problems in his business life. But this wasn't a business problem, and money couldn't fix it. For the first time in his adult life, Richard Blackwood felt completely powerless. He was used to making deals, finding leverage, creating win-win situations. Death wasn't interested in negotiating. As he stood in his office that afternoon, looking out at the city where his daughter was lying in a hospital bed 12 floors below, Richard made a silent promise. He would try anything, believe in anything, pay any price if it meant saving Emma's life. His rational mind might reject the impossible, but his father's heart was ready to embrace any miracle that walked through the door. Maya spent 3 days watching the hospital from across the street, learning the patterns of security guards and staff shifts. Chicago General Hospital was a fortress of glass and steel, with cameras at every entrance and guards who looked twice at anyone who didn't belong. A homeless teenager definitely didn't belong in a place where millionaires brought their sick children. She had tried the direct approach first, walking up to the main desk and asking to see Emma Blackwood. The receptionist had looked at Maya's dirty clothes and tangled hair with barely concealed disgust. "Are you family?" she asked, already knowing the answer. When Maya explained she might be able to help, the woman threatened to call security. Maya left quickly, but she didn't give up. The newspaper article was wearing thin from being folded and unfolded so many times. Maya had memorized every word, every detail about Emma's mysterious illness. The symptoms sounded familiar somehow, reminding her of a neighbor's child from years ago who had gotten very sick until Maya's grandmother had quietly helped him recover. Nobody had called it witchcraft then. They had just been grateful. On the fourth day, Maya noticed a pattern. Richard Blackwood arrived at the hospital every morning at exactly 7:30, carrying a cup of coffee and looking like he hadn't slept. He took a private elevator to the pediatric wing on the 12th floor. At lunchtime, he would come down to the small garden area behind the hospital, sitting alone on a bench with his phone pressed to his ear, conducting business meetings while his daughter fought for her life upstairs. Maya knew this was her only chance. During lunch hour, the garden was usually empty except for Mr. Blackwood. The security guards couldn't see this area from their posts, and there were several ways to slip in through the maintenance entrances. She had learned these routes during her first weeks of homelessness, when finding safe places to sleep meant knowing every hidden corner of the city. On Thursday afternoon, Maya cleaned herself up as best she could in a gas station bathroom. She braided her hair and washed her face, trying to look less threatening. Her clothes were still obviously worn and dirty, but there was nothing she could do about that. She practiced what she would say, knowing she would probably only get one chance to speak before security threw her out. Richard was sitting in his usual spot when Maya approached, speaking quietly into his phone about quarterly projections. He looked exhausted, his expensive suit wrinkled from sleeping in hospital chairs. There were deep circles under his eyes, and his hands shook slightly as he held his coffee cup. This was a man at the end of his rope. Maya waited until he finished his call, then stepped out from behind the tall bushes where she had been hiding. "Mr. Blackwood?" she said softly, trying not to startle him. "I need to talk to you about your daughter." Richard looked up sharply, immediately scanning Maya from head to toe. His businessman's instincts kicked in, assessing whether she was a threat or just another person trying to take advantage of his desperation. "How did you get in here?" he asked, reaching for his phone to call security. "Please don't," Maya said quickly, raising her hands to show she meant no harm. "I know you think I'm just some crazy homeless girl, but I can help Emma. I know that sounds impossible, but I can heal her. I have a gift." Richard's expression hardened. "Listen, I don't know what your game is, but this isn't funny. My daughter is dying, and I don't have time for whatever scam you're running." He stood up, towering over Maya's small frame. "Security will escort you out." "She has an autoimmune disorder," Maya said desperately, the words tumbling out before he could walk. "Wait. Her body is attacking itself. The doctors can't figure out why it started or how to stop it. She's getting weaker every day, and they're talking about making her comfortable instead of trying to cure her." Richard froze. None of that information had been in the newspaper articles. Maya could see the moment his certainty cracked, just a little. "How do you know that?" he asked slowly. "I don't know how I know," Maya admitted. "I just do. When I saw her picture in the paper, I could feel what was wrong with her. It's like her immune system got confused and forgot how to tell the difference. Between enemies and friends, I've seen it before, and I've fixed it before." "You're talking about witchcraft," Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Faith healing. Snake oil." "I'm talking about a gift I inherited from my grandmother," Maya replied. "Call it whatever you want. I don't care what word you use if it means I can save your daughter's life." For a long moment, they stared at each other. The successful billionaire businessman and the homeless teenager accused of witchcraft. Everything in Richard's rational mind told him to walk away, to call security, to protect himself and Emma from whatever con this girl was trying to pull. But as he looked into Maya's eyes, he saw something that stopped him cold. He saw the same desperate love he felt for Emma reflected back at him. This wasn't a scammer or a mentally ill person seeking attention. This was someone who genuinely believed she could help, someone who cared about a girl she had never even met. The intensity of Maya's conviction was impossible to fake. "Even if I believed you," Richard said quietly, "which I don't, the doctors would never allow it. They'd have you arrested for practicing medicine without a license? Then don't tell them," Maya said simply. "Just let me try. What do you have to lose?" The question hung in the air between them. Richard knew exactly what he had to lose. His daughter, his only child, the most important person in his world. Emma was dying anyway, despite all the best medical care money could buy. What was the harm in letting a homeless girl with healing hands try something the doctors couldn't do? Getting Maya into Emma's hospital room proved to be more complicated than either of them had expected. Richard's wealth could buy him a lot of things, but smuggling a homeless teenager past hospital security wasn't something money could easily solve. They needed a plan that wouldn't raise suspicions or put Emma at risk if something went wrong. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the younger doctors on Emma's team, had been growing increasingly frustrated with the case. She had watched too many children die when conventional medicine failed, and she wasn't afraid to consider alternatives that her older colleagues would dismiss immediately. When Richard carefully approached her about allowing an experimental consultation, she agreed to look the other way for exactly 1 hour. Maya spent the night before the attempt in a cheap motel room that Richard had paid for, trying to prepare herself mentally for what she was about to do. She had never attempted to heal someone as sick as Emma. Her grandmother had warned her that using the gift on serious illnesses could be dangerous, not just for the patient, but for the healer as well. Maya might absorb some of Emma's sickness into her own body during the process, but Maya had made up her mind. This girl was her age, with her whole life ahead of her. If Maya's gift could save Emma, then the risk was worth taking. She thought about all the accusations of witchcraft, all the fear and hatred she had faced in recent months. Maybe this was her chance to prove that her abilities came from something good, something healing rather than harmful. On Friday evening, when the hospital was quieter and fewer staff members were around, Richard led Maya through a service elevator to the 12th floor. She wore scrubs that Dr. Chen had provided, with her hair tucked under a surgical cap. To anyone passing by, she looked like a young medical student or intern. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Emma's room was dimmer than Maya had expected, with machines humming softly around a hospital bed that looked too big for the pale girl lying in it. Emma was awake but drowsy from medication, her eyes unfocused as she tried to track who was entering her room. She looked much worse than her newspaper photo had suggested, thin and fragile, like a flower that had been kept too long without sunlight. "Emma," Richard said gently, taking his daughter's hand. "This is Maya. She's here to try something that might help you feel better." Emma's eyes focused on Maya with some difficulty. "Are you a new doctor?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You look really young." Maya pulled a chair close to Emma's bedside and sat down carefully. "I'm not a doctor," she said honestly. "I'm more like someone who has a special way of helping people feel better. Is it okay if I try?" Despite her weakness, Emma managed a small smile. "At this point, I'm willing to try anything. The regular doctors are completely stumped." She glanced at her father with a look that was far too mature for her 16 years. "Dad's been worried sick about me." Maya felt the familiar warmth beginning to build in her palms. Just being this close to Emma, she could sense the chaos happening inside the girl's body. The confused immune system attacking healthy organs, the inflammation spreading through her bloodstream, the way her life force was slowly ebbing away. It was worse than Maya had feared, but not hopeless. "I need to put my hands on you," Maya explained. "It might feel warm or tingly, but it shouldn't hurt. If anything feels wrong, just tell me to stop." Emma nodded weakly. Maya placed her hands gently on Emma's forehead first, then moved them to her chest over her heart. The warmth in Maya's palms intensified immediately, and she could feel Emma's illness like a dark tangle of confusion and pain. Her gift reached out carefully, trying to understand what had gone wrong and how to fix it. Richard watched from the foot of the bed, his businessman's skepticism warring with his desperate hope. He had agreed to this because he had run out of rational options, but seeing Maya's hands glowing with a faint golden light made him question everything he thought he knew about the world. Maya's eyes rolled back slightly as she connected more deeply with Emma's illness. She could feel the precise moment when Emma's immune system had become confused, triggered by a combination of stress, environmental factors, and genetic predisposition. The healing process would require convincing Emma's body to remember how to tell friend from foe, how to protect without destroying. The work was exhausting. Maya felt Emma's pain flowing into her own body, the aching joints, the constant fatigue, the burning sensation of inflammation. But she also felt something else: Emma's incredible will to live, her determination to recover and help other people someday. That strength gave Maya the power she needed to continue. After 20 minutes, Maya's hands began to shake from the effort. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool air conditioning. Emma's color was already improving slightly, and her breathing seemed easier, but the healing wasn't complete. Maya knew she needed more time, but her body was reaching its limits. "It's working," Emma whispered in amazement. "I can feel it working. The constant ache in my chest is getting better." Dr. Chen, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped forward with a worried expression. "Maya, you need to stop. You're pushing yourself too hard." But Maya shook her head stubbornly. "She's not completely healed yet. I can fix this, I just need a little more time." That's when everything went wrong. Maya collapsed before anyone could catch her, her body hitting the hospital floor with a sickening thud. Her eyes rolled back completely, showing only whites, and her limbs began to convulse violently. Richard shouted for help while Dr. Chen immediately knelt beside Maya, checking her pulse and trying to keep her from injuring herself during the seizure. Emma, despite her own weakness, struggled to sit up in her hospital bed. "What's happening to her?" she cried out, tears streaming down her face. "Maya, please be okay." The room suddenly filled with medical staff responding to Richard's emergency call. Dr. Martinez, the head of Emma's medical team, took one look at the scene, and his face darkened with fury. "Mr. Blackwood, what is this girl doing in my patient's room? How did she get past security?" Before Richard could answer, Maya's convulsions stopped as suddenly as they had begun. She lay perfectly still on the cold hospital floor, her breathing so shallow it was barely visible. Dr. Chen couldn't find a pulse at first, and for a terrifying moment, everyone thought the worst had happened. "She was trying to heal me," Emma said weakly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "She has a gift, Dad. I could feel it working. The pain in my chest is almost gone for the first time in months." Dr. Martinez looked skeptical and angry. "Mr. Blackwood, I don't know what kind of faith healer nonsense this is, but you've endangered your daughter and this young woman. I'm calling security immediately." "Wait," Dr. Chen interrupted, staring at the monitors connected to Emma. "Look at her numbers. Her white blood cell count is normalizing. The inflammation markers are dropping rapidly. Her oxygen levels are the best they've been in weeks." The room fell silent except for the beeping of medical equipment. Every doctor and nurse turned to look at Emma's monitors, unable to believe what they were seeing. Emma's vital signs were improving by the minute, as if her body was remembering how to be healthy again. Meanwhile, Maya remained unconscious on the floor. Dr. Chen had managed to find a weak pulse, but Maya's skin was cold and clammy. It was as if she had absorbed all of Emma's illness into her own body, and was now fighting the same battle that had been killing the billionaire's daughter. "We need to get both of them to the ICU immediately," Dr. Chen ordered. "Maya needs life, support, and we need to monitor Emma's improvement to make sure it's real." As the medical team prepared to move both girls, Richard knelt beside Maya's still form. This homeless teenager, had risked her own life to save his daughter, asking for nothing in return. All the accusations of witchcraft, all the fear and hatred she had faced, none of it had stopped her from trying to help a stranger. "Is she going to be okay?" Richard asked Dr. Chen quietly. "I don't know," the doctor admitted. "I've never seen anything like this before. It's like she took Emma's illness into herself. Scientifically, it should be impossible." Over the next 6 hours, Maya hovered between life and death in the ICU, while Emma's recovery continued at an unprecedented rate. Word spread through the hospital about the miraculous improvement in the billionaire's daughter and the mysterious girl who had somehow caused it. Nurses whispered about witchcraft and divine intervention, while doctors struggled to find medical explanations for what they had witnessed. Richard refused to leave Maya's bedside, even though Emma was asking for him. He felt responsible for what had happened. Maya had warned him that using her gift on serious illnesses was dangerous, but he had been too desperate to save his daughter to properly consider the risks. At 3 in the morning, Maya's eyes finally opened. She was weak and disoriented, but her vital signs began to stabilize. The first word she whispered was Emma. "She's okay," Richard assured her immediately. "She's better than okay. You saved her life." Maya tried to sit up but was too weak. "The healing worked? She's really going to be fine?" "The doctors are calling it a spontaneous remission," Richard said with a tired smile. "They're baffled. Emma's immune system has completely reset itself. All her levels are normal for the first time in months." Maya closed her eyes with relief. "My grandmother always said the gift comes with a price. I knew I might get sick too, but I couldn't let Emma die when I could help her." Dr. Chen appeared at Maya's bedside with Emma's latest test results. "I need to ask you something," she said seriously. "How did you know exactly what was wrong with Emma? Your healing targeted her immune system with surgical precision. It's like you could see inside her body and know exactly what needed to be fixed." Maya was quiet for a long moment. "I've always been able to feel people's pain," she said finally. "Not just physical pain, but the deeper hurt that causes illness. Emma's body was confused and scared. It forgot how to protect her properly. I just reminded it what it was supposed to do." The explanation didn't satisfy the scientific minds in the room, but they couldn't argue with the results. Emma was sitting up in her own bed down the hall, eating solid food for the first time in weeks and asking when she could go home. As dawn broke over Chicago, Richard made a decision that would change both girls' lives forever. Maya had given him back his daughter, and he was going to make sure she never spent another night on the streets. 3 months later, Maya stood in the doorway of her new bedroom, still amazed that she had a home again. The room was larger than the apartment she had shared with her grandmother, with windows that faced east so she could watch the sunrise each morning. Richard had insisted she choose all the furniture herself, and Maya had picked simple, comfortable pieces that made her feel safe and grounded. Living with the Blackwood family had been an adjustment for everyone. Richard was used to solving problems with money and business deals, but Maya needed something much more fundamental. She needed to feel like she belonged somewhere. Emma had been instrumental in helping her father understand that Maya required patience and trust, not expensive gifts or grand gestures. The media attention had been intense at first. News outlets called Maya everything from the miracle girl to Chicago's angel of healing. Some religious groups claimed she was blessed by God, while skeptics insisted the whole thing was an elaborate hoax. Maya had learned to ignore both, the praise and the criticism, focusing instead on understanding her gift and learning how to use it responsibly. Dr. Chen had become Maya's unofficial mentor, helping her study anatomy and physiology so she could better understand what happened. During her healing sessions, they discovered that Maya's gift worked best when she could form an emotional connection with her patients, understanding not just their physical symptoms, but the underlying causes of their illness. Emma had made a complete recovery, with no sign that her autoimmune disorder would return. She was back in school, volunteering at local clinics, and more determined than ever to become a doctor herself. The experience of nearly dying had given her a deep appreciation for life and a burning desire to help other people facing similar struggles. You know, Emma said one evening as she and Maya sat in the garden behind Richard's penthouse, I never thanked you properly for what you did. Maya looked up from the medical textbook she was reading. Richard had enrolled her in a private tutoring program to help her catch up on the education she had missed during her months on the streets. You don't need to thank me, she said quietly. I did what anyone would have done. No, you didn't, Emma replied firmly. Anyone else would have walked away when people called them a witch. Anyone else would have given up when the world treated them like they were dangerous. But you risked your life to save a stranger. The accusations of witchcraft hadn't disappeared completely, but they had changed. Some people still crossed the street when they saw Maya coming, but others approached her with sick relatives hoping she might be able to help. Maya had learned to be more selective, working only with cases where traditional medicine had failed, and only when she felt emotionally prepared for the challenge. Richard had established a foundation to research alternative healing methods with Dr. Chen as the lead researcher. They were careful not to promote Maya as some kind of miracle cure, instead focusing on documenting her successes and trying to understand the scientific basis for her abilities. The goal was to bridge the gap between traditional medicine and healing practices that couldn't be easily explained. Maya's transformation had been remarkable to witness. The scared, homeless teenager had grown into a confident young woman who understood the power she carried and the responsibility that came with it. She still preferred simple clothes and kept her long hair in practical braids, but there was a strength in her posture now, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. One afternoon, Maya received a visitor that surprised everyone. Mrs. Patterson, the grocery store owner who had first accused her of witchcraft, appeared at Richard's penthouse looking nervous and ashamed. She had brought her grandson, a little boy with severe asthma who had been hospitalized repeatedly despite the best medical care. I was wrong about you, Mrs. Patterson said quietly, unable to meet Maya's eyes. I let fear make me cruel, but my grandson is suffering and the doctors say there's nothing more they can do. I was hoping maybe you could help him. Maya looked at the little boy who was struggling to breathe even with his inhaler. She could feel his fear and confusion, the way his body had forgotten how to process air properly. The familiar warmth began to build in her palms, but this time it felt different, stronger and more controlled than it had been before. I'll try, Maya said gently, kneeling down to the boy's level. But I need you to understand something, Mrs. Patterson. What I do isn't witchcraft, it's not evil or dangerous, it's just a gift that I inherited, like someone might inherit musical talent or artistic ability. Mrs. Patterson nodded tearfully. I understand. I'm sorry for what I said about you before. I was scared of something I didn't understand. The healing session was gentle and successful. The little boy's breathing improved dramatically, and his asthma attacks became much less frequent. Mrs. Patterson spread word through the neighborhood that Maya was a healer, not a witch, and slowly, the community's perception began to shift. As Maya's 18th birthday approached, she faced a decision about her future. She could continue living with the Blackwood family, pursuing her education, and using her gift to help people on a case-by-case basis. Or she could strike out on her own, perhaps traveling to places where her abilities might be needed most. Emma and Richard both hoped she would stay, but they understood that Maya needed to make her own choice about how to use her remarkable gift. Whatever she decided, they knew she would never again be the frightened homeless girl accused of witchcraft. She had proven to herself and to the world that her abilities came from love, not darkness, and that healing hands could triumph over fear and ignorance. Maya's grandmother had been right. God gives gifts for a reason, and Maya had finally discovered hers.